Xavier Marcos Padros started his career in motorsport as a race engineer for the BNC racing team. He got his first taste of Formula One while working for the fledgling HRT team as performance engineer from 2010-2012. After the team folded, he joined Williams Racing as a performance engineer for Felipe Massa. Seeking a new challenge, Marcos Padros decided to move to the United States to become chief race engineer for the NASCAR team Richard Childress Racing in 2015. Marcos Padros returned to Formula One with Scuderia Ferrari, first as a factory-based race engineer for the 2018 championship, and then became the race engineer for Charles Leclerc when the former Sauber driver joined the Italian side back in 2019, remaining with the Monegasque ever since. Marcos Padros is therefore the voice that guides Charles Leclerc every race weekend. But as we know by now, Scuderia Ferrari always generates a lot of discussion in the media and among fans. For better or for worse, that's understood. In the Chinese Grand Prix, the fifth stage of the 2024 Formula One racing campaign, in addition to the performance and the overall result, another interesting topic that sparked a heated debate emerged. In our case, addressing the issue, we will explain what was behind a series of team radio communications, the 5.451-kilometer Shanghai International Circuit. And we aim to discuss the incident without fueling a sterile argument. First of all, let's make a premise, claiming that the Spanish track engineer accompanying Charles Leclerc during the race weekend, namely Xavier Marcos Padros, is incompetent or something similar is utter nonsense. Perhaps the Spanish Formula One engineer will not go down in history as the greatest communicator of all time. Sure, he may make mistakes from time to time, that's fine, and it happens to any race engineer. But this crazy desire to put him on the media pillory every Sunday when there are races, frankly, seems exaggerated. We say this also because we have been listening to him on the radio for 5 years now, almost every single session, including the Friday practice sessions, and often observing the comments on social media, we notice how any opportunity is seized to decontextualize his indications over the team radio and tear him apart. A track engineer performs tremendous work throughout the weekend in close elbow-to-elbow contact with his driver. Not to mention one fact, behind the strategy proposals, advice, or directives, there is an entire team at work. Dozens of people connected at the pit wall, and also remotely providing the information we eventually hear on the team radio. Ultimately, to conclude this brief introduction before getting to the main point of the article, it must be said that the relationship between Charles Leclerc and Xavier Marcos Padros is excellent. The real leap in quality should be made upstream, if we really want to find someone to blame. Marcos's preparation, just like that of his colleagues, is top-notch. But nowadays, it's fashionable to emphasize his actions and only highlight his mistakes. That's our very debatable opinion, mind you. During the last laps of the 2024 Formula One Chinese Grand Prix, an intense dialogue unfolded between Xavier Marcos Padros and Charles Leclerc, where various pieces of information regarding tire management were sent to channel Radio 16. On the penultimate lap, Xavier relayed the following message to Charles. Try original line turns 7 and 8 for comparison. We know how difficult it is to hit the correct tire temperature window. The Shanghai International Circuit has an energy profile relative to the tire quite different from the Suzuka track. However, several problems arose during the race, especially as we have seen in previous articles, with the hard compound. In turns 1, 2, a considerable amount of energy is input into the compound, and the same applies to the fast change of direction between turns 7 and 8, the fastest corners on the track. Unlike last year in this Formula One championship, the Ferrari SF24 single-seater introduces less energy into the compounds. This aspect theoretically should benefit the race compared to the performance in the qualifying session, which was a key strength of last season's car. However, in colder track conditions, several headaches have emerged with the Pirelli hard compound. So let's focus on the hardest tire, which obviously operates in a higher operating range. For this simple reason, if in qualifying the Ferrari cars had some trouble getting to the first sector with the front axle at temperature, in the race with the hard tire, this headache became even more evident. The process that determines the so-called activation of the compound is very complex. It's not enough to reach a certain temperature value to ensure that the tire works properly. How it is activated and how certain corners are traversed during the race also matters a lot. As mentioned earlier, on this particular circuit, the strategic corners were precisely turns 7 and 8, which Xavier Marcos, Padros, and Charles Leclerc were discussing on the radio. While the Grand Prix was underway, back at the factory in Maranello, the engineers from the remote garage tried to remedy this context, or at least to get some feedback to identify solutions for the future. We refer to a specific study to solve this total misunderstanding about the hard compound, partly justified by the limited time available in the free practice session, given the fact that the Chinese Grand Prix weekend took place based on the sprint format, just like it will be the case for the Miami weekend. Within the Ferrari sporting management, simulations were initiated on multiple fronts, in real time, in order to understand how to unlock the performance of the white-banded Pirelli. The powerful computers devised a different warm-up process for the Italian compounds. Considering that the Chinese Grand Prix was coming to an end, and it was no longer possible to verify which type of intro to use on the newly fitted compound, the Maranello team in the pit was asked if Charles Leclerc could perform a test during the last laps. By traversing turns 7 and 8 with the original line, the famous original line from the team radio, they wanted to understand how the tires responded, especially those on the front end. As we know, Charles Leclerc didn't grasp the request right away because it wasn't anticipated beforehand. Moreover, considering the disrupted radio signal, the Monegasque driver mistook the word original for horizontal, and reflexively didn't understand the message that was sent to him or what to do. Hence his response, "What the hell does that mean?" Meanwhile, as the two tried to understand each other, there were only a few corners left, and the test requested by the Ferrari technicians from the remote garage was no longer feasible. That's why Marcos said, "Forget it, never mind. It's the last lap anyway." Calling Xavi incompetent or accusing him of ineptitude after knowing the facts doesn't make much sense anymore, apparently. A perfect example of one of the many hasty judgments, don't you think? While it is true that during the last few seasons we have heard some multiple noteworthy conversations between Charles Leclerc and his race engineer, Xavi Marcos Padros, over the board radio, which we may not have completely understood at first, and which at times obviously led to a reaction from Charles Leclerc in the heat of the moment, this is also true for other drivers. Ferrari team principal Frédéric Vasseur has confirmed that he does not pay too much attention to the harsh criticism in the media, and it is likely that Xavi Marcos Padros will continue to work with the Monegasque driver in the years to come. We should also remember that in the first part of the 2022 Formula One season, when Ferrari brought to the track a car capable of fighting for the race wins, there were no issues in the working relationship between Xavi Marcos Padros and Charles Leclerc, as the Monegasque driver secured 4 race wins and could have won at least another 3 races had it not been for some power unit technical issues and some questionable strategy decisions made by the Maranello pit wall.